Hi, I'm Reverend Mia. Thanks for joining us for this week's church school lesson. This unit for October, we're going to be encountering parables. And before we get into today's story, I wanted to say a little bit about what a parable is. Parables are a special kind of story that Jesus tells that didn't actually happen. The characters and the plot, it's not a literal historical lesson. But in other ways, parables are profoundly and deeply true. They speak to a truth about God, about humankind, and about Jesus' message here on earth. So as you listen to today's story, listen for the meaning behind the story. And it's okay if you don't get it right now. Parables are meant to be told over and over. They're meant to be approached and listened to at different points in our lives, and each time we hear them, they may have a different meaning for us.
One day, Jesus told a story meant for the religious leaders and priests in the crowd. There was once a man who planted vines and prepared everything needed to grow good grapes and turn them into wine. Then he had to go abroad, so he put tenants in charge of his vineyard. When the grape harvest was due, he sent a servant to collect his share of the grapes as rent. But instead of handing over what they owed, the tenants beat up the servant and sent him off empty-handed. The owner sent another servant and then another, but every time the tenants ill-treated and sometimes killed them. The owner decided to have one more try. "I'll send my son to them," he said. "They are sure to show him respect." Those wicked tenants, they seized the owner's son, killed him, and threw out the body. They thought that once they'd gotten rid of him, they would become the new owners. "What do you think the owner will do next?" Jesus asked his listeners. "He will come himself and take the vineyard away from those tenants," they mumbled in reply. Silence followed. Jesus' hearers knew very well what this story meant. The nation was often pictured as a vineyard. They, the leaders, were the tenants, put in charge by God. Many kings and leaders of the nation had refused down the centuries to take notice of God's servants, the prophets. They were refusing to listen to God's last and most important messenger, his own son. And even now, they were plotting to kill him.
Today's parable hints at how God is turning the world upside down. God takes the people who rejected the prophets or Jesus or just everyday people who are discarded and discounted, and God places them at the center of God's plan for the world. God takes the rejected stone and makes it the cornerstone. Sometimes it's hard for us to tell how God is moving in the world and turning the world upside down, how God is making the first to be last and the last to be first. Sometimes we're just too close. So for today's activity, I have a challenge for you. I went around our church and took really close-up photos and flipped them upside down. See if you can recognize what they are before I reveal what they are. See how well you know our church. And you can do this activity too. You can take close-up, upside-down photos of everyday objects around your house and see if people in your life can tell what they are. How'd you do? Was it hard or was it easy? I'd love to hear. Let's close with a prayer. God, you are the foundational rock of our lives. Thank you for sending Jesus to be the cornerstone, even though he was rejected in his time. Help us to recognize the people in our lives who call us back to God. Help us to listen. God, you reject no one. Thank you. Amen.